In the previous demonstration, I showed how we can use different Canvas APIs to render rectangles and even do some basic charting. But as we did that charting, we saw that when you render a rectangle, it starts at the upper left-hand corner of the rectangle and draws down, which presents a little bit of a challenge because we have to account for the gap if you want the chart to render from kind of the bottom up. So in this demonstration, I'm going to show another technique that we can use that relates to something in the canvas called transforms that would do the same type of thing but make the code a little bit more simple from the standpoint of not having to subtract off that distance between the bottom and where that rectangle renders. So you can see that I've already created a canvas and we've loaded it up. We have our context as well as our data, where we're going to start, and some other items here. And what I'm going to do now is come in and we're going to use the canvas's translate function to actually say where we want to start rendering this type of data. So the first thing I'm going to do is we're going to make this chart just a little bit bigger here, and we're going to go to about, we'll say 600 by 400. Now what I want to do is the context has a transform type of operation you can call called translate. And what translate does is an XY coordinate translation. So it'll actually move where you're rendering down. And so we're going to actually go to around 375 and 200. So we're going to go 375 over, 200 down. And that's what a translate does, is actually positions where we're going to, in this case, start drawing at. Now from here, I want to go ahead and rotate the canvas, because ultimately what I want to do is start rendering from a baseline and draw up. Well, by default, as you saw in the previous demonstration, rectangles draw down. So I need to flip this over 180 degrees around, and we can do that through a rotate. So I'm going to say, let's rotate this. And if we did 2 times math.pi, that would be 360 degrees around. So 1 times math.pi is 180 degrees. So we're going to go ahead and flip it over and go 180 degrees around. Now from here, it's actually pretty simple. We can come in and we can set up, for instance, the fill style, and I'll do green again, like I did in the previous demo. And then we can loop through the actual scores. So let me go ahead and set up a loop again. And we're going to go while I is less than scores.length. And inside of the loop, what we'll go ahead and do is fill our rectangle. We're going to grab our current x, and we're going to start from 0 though. So we're basically going to be starting at the top of the canvas, but because we flipped the canvas over 180 degrees, it's going to look like we're rendering from the actual bottom. And we'll make the width the same, 50 pixels, and we'll grab the scores I. So really what we're doing is we're drawing from 0 on the canvas down, but because we flipped it, it's going to render and make it look like we're drawing from the bottom of the canvas up to whatever our score height is that we're going to apply to the height. Now from here, we'll go ahead and increment our x by, we'll do 10 pixels again, and we're pretty much ready to rock and roll here. So we've basically set up our scores. We then are going to translate a different drawing position. I'll kind of play around with this in just a moment to show you why we're doing that. We're going to rotate the canvas or flip it over 180 degrees. And then from there, it's pretty much the same. Now, what's going to happen is it's going to do 100, but because we flip this over, the bar for 100 is going to be on the far right instead of on the left. So we can easily do an array.reverse to get this going. But let's go ahead and give this a shot and see what we have at this point. All right, now it looks pretty much like what we just did. However, it's just flipped over. This is actually now what was the top of the canvas. This is the 0, and now we're drawing up. So it kind of makes it a little bit easier to not have to worry about the math. But of course, there's a little bit more overhead in this case because we are doing a rotation, but it's a one-time rotation, so it's not like it's that big of a deal. Now, if we want it to look exactly like the other one, the 100, as I just mentioned, is actually on the far right because we flipped this over with the rotate. So if we launch this again, you'll notice the biggest bar is over here to the right, and then there's the 90. So actually the array items 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 are now going from right to left, and obviously we're used to seeing those probably from left to right if that's what we actually wanted, if we want to mirror the data. So that's pretty easy to fix. We can come in and say scores, and we'll do a reverse here. And that'll simply reverse the array around. And there we go. So now it looks exactly like we did in the previous demo, but I'm not having to worry about subtracting the height. Now, whether or not you want to go with this approach, or you want to go ahead and just do the math and draw those down as in the previous demo, that would certainly be up to you. Really, the point of this, though, is to show that with a canvas, this provides a good demonstration of using things like the translate and the rotate. Now, real quick, let me go ahead and take off the translate here and show you what happens when we run it. And you notice you don't see anything, and what happened is the 0 was up here, it literally got flipped, and we're basically off of the screen at this point. So the reason I'm doing a translation to go to over 375 and 200 is so we can see it. So let's go ahead and mess with this just a little. Let's go over 175, 200. We'll launch it again. And now notice that some of the canvas is on, but we're actually off the screen over here. And that's because we need to translate it even more. So we'll go ahead and go back to what we had, 375. And that turns out to be the magic number. Now we can certainly calculate this based on the width of the canvas and do some division there, divide by 2 and maybe add a little bit. But by doing this, it now works and we get the actual canvas, and it makes our math a little bit more simple when it comes to filling the rectangle, because we don't have to worry about calculating the difference between the canvas height, subtracting off the actual score like we did earlier. So to wrap up, that shows some of the different Canvas APIs with regard to rectangles, and you saw two different demonstrations of rendering a really simple bar chart. One is using kind of the standard way, and that's the one I showed earlier in the initial demo. And then this shows off some of the different translation and rotation functions that are built into the canvas, and these are called transforms officially. We'll be seeing more of this as we go throughout the course.